Imagine sitting at a table, your heart racing, with a single choice separating triumph from disaster, not in a casino, but in your career, your relationships, your life. What if I told you that the best decision makers aren't always the loudest or most confident, but the ones who think like poker players? In poker, as in life, it's easy to confuse a lucky break with a good decision, or to blame ourselves unfairly when things don't go our way. One of the most valuable lessons professional poker players internalize early on is the ability to distinguish between what is within their control and what is not. This isn't just a matter of ego management. It's a mental discipline rooted in rational thinking. Luck, by definition, is random. It's the card you didn't see coming, the job offer that came out of nowhere, or the unexpected call that changed everything. Skill, on the other hand, is built. It's pattern recognition, emotional regulation, strategic foresight. It's the preparation you did before the meeting, the hours you spent practicing alone, the insight that helped you choose what not to say in a difficult conversation. The human brain is wired to see cause and effect. We crave narratives that make sense, stories that explain outcomes in a clean, linear way, but poker disrupts that instinct. You can play a hand perfectly and still lose. You can make a terrible move and win big. The game punishes those who rely only on outcomes to measure success, because it's possible to do everything right and still not get the result you hoped for. So, what do professionals do differently? They measure the quality of their decisions based on the process, not just the payoff. They ask, did I consider all the information I had at the time? Did I keep my emotions in check? Did I act in line with my long-term strategy? In this way, decision-making becomes a skill in itself, a craft refined through deliberate practice rather than something left to fate. It's also important to understand how seductive the myth of luck can be. In life, we often attribute other people's successes to luck and our own failures to fate. This tendency disempowers us. It allows us to romanticize success as something magical rather than earned. Poker players know better. They sit with the ambiguity, holding space for the randomness of life while still taking full responsibility for how they play their hand. Learning to separate skill from luck gives you resilience. You stop overreacting to every up or down. You become less impulsive, less judgmental, of others and yourself. You start to trust your own process more deeply, which ironically makes you more likely to win in the long run. Not because you're luckier, but because you've learned how to navigate uncertainty with clarity and strength. One of the most challenging skills to develop, both at the poker table and in life, is the ability to detach your emotions from the outcome of your decisions. We're emotional beings by nature, and that's not a flaw. Emotions can inform us, connect us to others, and inspire action. But when it comes to making decisions, especially under pressure, our emotions can become tangled with the result in ways that cloud judgment and distort learning. Imagine making a difficult choice, walking away from a relationship, turning down a job offer, investing your time or energy in something uncertain. If it works out, you feel validated, even euphoric. If it doesn't, the temptation is immediate and powerful: regret, shame, self-doubt. You start to question your instincts. What was I thinking? How could I have been so wrong? This emotional roller coaster is intensified by our tendency to tie our self-worth to external validation. In poker, this trap is constant. You might fold a hand that statistically should be folded, only to find out later you would have won if you'd stayed in. That sting, the emotional punishment of a good decision with a bad result, can be brutal. On the flip side, you might make a reckless move, driven by impulse or frustration, and end up winning the hand. In both cases, the result feels like the loudest teacher, but that voice is misleading. Professionals learn to override that emotional feedback loop. They understand that the outcome is a single snapshot, a moment in time shaped by a complex blend of probabilities and unknowns. What matters more is how the decision was made, Was it informed? Was it calm? Was it aligned with long-term goals and consistent strategies? By focusing on the decision-making process rather than the result, they protect themselves from the emotional highs and lows that can sabotage future choices. This doesn't mean they are numb or indifferent. Quite the opposite. They feel disappointment, just like anyone else. But they learn to notice the emotion without letting it steer the wheel. They practice self-awareness in real time, observing frustration, naming fear, recognizing the urge to act rashly, and then choosing not to indulge it. In daily life, the same principle applies. Think of how many decisions are made in the heat of emotion, quitting a job out of anger, sending a message we later regret, backing out of an opportunity because of a moment of fear. When emotion is in the driver's seat, logic becomes a passenger, and in hindsight, we often realize that we weren't reacting to reality, we were reacting to a feeling. This is why developing emotional discipline is not just a mental habit, it's an act of long-term self-respect. It means pausing before responding. It means not tying your sense of identity to the latest result. It means valuing your ability to decide well over your need to win quickly. Detaching from the outcome doesn't make you less invested. It makes you more clear-sighted, more steady, and ultimately more powerful in your choices. In poker, folding is the act of letting go of a hand, choosing not to play, even if you've already put something on the table. To an outsider, it might look like quitting. To a novice, it might feel like failure, but to a seasoned professional, folding is often the most intelligent, courageous, and strategic move in the game. It's not just about avoiding loss, it's about preserving energy, maintaining focus, and recognizing the difference between persistence and self-sabotage. The cultural narrative around success often glamorizes relentless effort. We're taught to never give up, to push through discomfort at all costs, and to equate quitting with weakness. But life, like poker, doesn't reward blind persistence. It rewards discernment. The best players don't stay in every hand. They evaluate, reassess, and fold when the odds are no longer in their favor, not because they're afraid to play, but because they're wise enough to wait for a better moment. Folding, when done well, is not an emotional reaction. It's a calculated decision. It requires clarity. It means asking yourself hard questions. Is this path still aligned with who I am? Am I holding on because of pride, fear, or sunk costs? Have I confused patience with stubbornness? These are not questions that ego likes to answer, and yet they are the very questions that separate impulsive players from intentional ones. In life, we're faced with similar moments all the time, situations where something isn't working, but we keep holding on. Maybe it's a career we chose years ago that no longer inspires us. Maybe it's a relationship where we're giving far more than we're receiving. Or maybe it's a goal we once believed in that no longer reflects our values. Folding in these cases isn't defeat, it's growth. It's the recognition that continuing to invest time, energy, or identity in a losing hand is not only costly, it prevents us from being open to better opportunities. The psychological weight of folding can be heavy. There's the fear of judgment, the guilt of giving up, the uncertainty of what comes next. But poker trains you to see the long game. Winning isn't about proving something in every round. It's about managing risk, avoiding unnecessary losses, and positioning yourself to play stronger when the time is right. This mindset, when applied to everyday decision-making, transforms the way we deal with change, endings, and transitions. There's also a deeper emotional intelligence behind folding, the willingness to accept reality without resistance. To fold well, you have to be honest with yourself and with the situation. You have to tune out your hopes for what could be and focus instead on what is. That kind of radical clarity isn't easy. It takes practice. It requires separating your identity from your circumstances and trusting that stepping back can be an act of strength, not surrender. Folding doesn't mean you've wasted what you invested. It means you've learned from it. It means you're reallocating your attention to where it can matter more. In a world that constantly urges us to do more, be more, and push harder, The quiet discipline of folding is both revolutionary and deeply empowering. One of the most profound mindset shifts that professional poker players adopt is learning to think in probabilities rather than absolutes. It may sound like a technical distinction at first, but it fundamentally changes how decisions are made, not just at the table, but in the real world. Most of us are raised to think in terms of right versus wrong, good versus bad, success versus failure. We're trained to seek certainty and clarity, even in situations where neither truly exists. But poker, a game steeped in uncertainty, teaches a different lesson. Nothing is guaranteed. There are no sure wins and no absolute losses, only better or worse decisions based on the odds. In the heat of a decision, the average person often asks themselves, "What's the right choice?" as if there's a single, infallible path to follow. But professionals ask instead, "What's the most likely outcome if I make this move?" This subtle shift invites curiosity and calculation instead of pressure. It acknowledges complexity. It opens up space for nuance. Because real life, just like poker, is full of unknowns, moving parts, and unpredictable players. Thinking probabilistically means accepting that even the best decisions can have poor outcomes, and that bad decisions can sometimes appear to succeed purely by chance. This way of thinking requires humility. It demands that you let go of the desire to be certain before you act. In poker, every decision is made under incomplete information. You never see all the cards. You read patterns, weigh risks, study behavior, and then make the most informed choice possible, knowing full well that things might still go sideways. This kind of decision-making translates powerfully to business, relationships, and personal growth. Whether you're launching a project, having a difficult conversation, or taking a new path in life, the truth is that you will rarely have all the information you want. But you can still make a strong decision by assessing likelihoods rather than seeking guarantees. Thinking in probabilities also helps manage emotional volatility. When you embrace uncertainty as part of the process, you stop taking outcomes so personally. A decision that doesn't pan out doesn't feel like a reflection of your worth or intelligence. It becomes data, something to learn from and adjust for next time. This makes you more resilient, less reactive, and far more capable of adapting when things change. In practical terms, probabilistic thinking shows up in countless ways. It's asking yourself, what's the risk of this choice compared to the potential reward? It's acknowledging that every decision carries trade-offs and measuring whether those trade-offs are acceptable given your current goals. It's being able to say, there's a 70% chance this will work, and I'm okay with the 30% risk, instead of chasing the illusion of a perfect failure-proof choice. Perhaps most importantly, it helps you stay grounded when making decisions under pressure. In high-stakes moments, when emotions run high and the impulse is to act quickly, probabilistic thinking gives you a framework. It encourages you to slow down, gather what data you can, and then make a deliberate, calculated choice. Over time, this approach builds confidence, not because you become more certain, but because you become more comfortable with uncertainty itself. In a world that constantly urges us to move faster, decide quicker, and respond instantly, the idea of pausing before you act can feel almost counterintuitive, like a luxury you can't afford. But for professional poker players, the pause isn't optional, it's essential. It's the space between impulse and intention, between reaction and response. And in that space lies the difference between a decision made out of instinctive emotion and one shaped by strategy, awareness, and clarity. At the poker table, the pause is often subtle, a breath held, a glance down, a stillness before reaching for chips. It's a moment of recalibration. Professionals use that pause to observe, to think, and to feel without being overtaken by those feelings. They're not just calculating odds, they're reading the room, listening for tells, checking in with their own internal state. What am I reacting to right now? Is it the last hand I lost? the player who bluffed me, or a genuine opportunity. That moment of reflection prevents rash decisions and protects the integrity of their game. In everyday life, we rarely give ourselves the gift of that pause. The pressure to respond, especially in emotionally charged moments, is relentless. Someone challenges you in a meeting, and your instinct is to defend. A loved one disappoints you, and the urge to lash out or shut down bubbles up instantly. You're presented with a tempting offer or alarming news, and the adrenaline pushes you to act before you've even fully absorbed what's happening. This is the danger of living without space. We confuse immediacy with wisdom. Learning to pause interrupts this pattern. It allows you to re-enter the moment with agency rather than operating on autopilot. And it's not just about waiting, it's about using that time to ask better questions. What's really going on here? Is my response aligned with my values or just my mood? What would I decide if I weren't under pressure? These questions slow the spiral of reaction and create a foundation for more thoughtful, empowered choices. The pause also fosters emotional intelligence. In poker, players learn to sit with discomfort, to tolerate tension without needing to immediately resolve it. That's a powerful skill, because discomfort often leads to some of our most unhelpful behaviors. The ability to pause and simply notice a rising emotion without suppressing it or acting on it is a form of strength that few people practice. It requires self-awareness, self-trust, and a willingness to be uncomfortable without losing control. In moments of uncertainty, the pause becomes even more valuable. When the path forward isn't clear, when the stakes are high, and when everyone else is rushing, your ability to stop, even briefly, becomes a strategic advantage. It creates time to gather information, to observe what others are missing, to ensure your next move is based on insight rather than instinct. There's also a deeper kind of wisdom that arises in stillness. In the silence of the pause, you can hear yourself more clearly. You can reconnect with your goals, your intuition, and your deeper reasons for acting. It's in this quiet space that clarity emerges, not as a flash of certainty, but as a steady confidence rooted in presence. Pausing doesn't mean being passive. It doesn't mean avoiding decisions or waiting forever. It means respecting the weight of your choices enough to give them room to breathe. In that breath, you become less reactive and more responsive. You don't just play the hand you're dealt, you play it with intention, precision, and presence. In the world of professional poker, the game doesn't end when the cards are laid down or the chips are pushed across the table. The real mastery begins afterward, in the quiet, disciplined act of reflection. While amateurs may judge their performance solely by whether they won or lost a hand, professionals go deeper. They review each choice, each hesitation, each cue they missed or read correctly, because they understand something fundamental. Excellence isn't just about performance, it's about refinement. Reflection is where skill becomes wisdom. It's where patterns are revealed, blind spots are uncovered, and habits are either strengthened or corrected. A single hand in poker contains a multitude of decisions: when to bet, how much, what to read from another player's body language, when to fold, when to push, and each one offers an opportunity to learn. Professionals don't simply shrug off a mistake or celebrate a win and move on. They study it. They replay it mentally or review hand histories. They ask not just what happened, but why it happened, and what could have been done differently. Translating this into everyday decision-making means adopting a mindset that is both analytical and compassionate. It's not about harsh self-criticism or endless rumination. It's about honest self-inquiry. What did I know at the time? What assumptions did I make? Was I acting on principle, pressure, or pride? These questions don't always have easy answers, but they help illuminate the deeper mechanisms behind our choices. Over time, this kind of reflective thinking builds sharper intuition, not the kind based on vague feelings, but on accumulated insight. Refinement is the next step. It's taking what you've learned from reflection and integrating it into how you show up moving forward. In poker, this means adjusting your strategy based on the type of opponents you're facing or how your own tendencies are being perceived. In life, it means making small but meaningful shifts in behavior, maybe communicating more clearly in difficult conversations, managing your time differently, or noticing when you tend to make decisions based on fear rather than confidence. This process requires patience. It means being willing to revisit moments you might rather forget, not to dwell on them, but to extract something useful. And it means not waiting for disaster or triumph to review your decisions. Professionals reflect consistently whether the session went well or not, because every decision holds information, and ignoring it is like leaving valuable clues on the table. There's also a humility embedded in this approach. It takes courage to admit that a choice you were proud of might not have been your best. It takes strength to see that even smart decisions can be improved. But when you embrace reflection as part of your growth rather than a judgment on your worth, you become more adaptable, more precise, and more grounded. Your decision-making matures because you're not just reacting to outcomes, you're learning from them intentionally over time. In a culture that prizes constant motion and immediate success, taking time to pause and reflect can feel like a detour. But for those committed to mastery, it's a direct path to long-term progress.